The man who led the charge of lock her up at the GOP convention, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, is now a convicted felon. A dramatic twist that had spectators shouting "lock him up" as he left the courthouse on Friday after pleading guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russia. Flynn has agreed to cooperate with Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. The plea agreement stems from phone conversations the disgraced three-star general had with Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak, after the election but before Trump took office. Flynn has admitted he lied to FBI agents who interviewed him about those conversations. And according to court documents, Flynn says he contacted the Russians at the urging of two top officials in the Trump transition team. Flynn was one of Trump's earliest allies, part of Trump's traveling inner circle, from the campaign to the transition and into the early days of the administration. None other than Michael Flynn is named, no one other than Michael Flynn, I should say, is named in the indictment. But the swift guilty plea means that Mueller is reaching right into the heart of Trump's inner circle, applying pressure that can only go in one direction, up toward Trump and his family, including his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And joining me now, MSNBC legal analyst Paul Butler, Naveed Jamali, intelligence analyst and former FBI double agent, Rosa Brooks, former Pentagon official, and MSNBC justice and security analyst Matt Miller. Thank you all for being here. Naveed, I'm going to go to you first. You wrote a piece in Newsweek that's up today. Our viewers can check it out. And you said Michael Flynn lied to the FBI about Russia, but he should have known better. Why should he have known better?
Well, simply, Joy, because he spent 30-plus years as a member of the intelligence community. And look, for those that don't know, when you're entrusted with secrets, the code you take is just to tell the truth. And that sounds quaint and that might sound simple, but when Michael Flynn was in the room with those investigators, he had to know that there was a decision that he had to make. He could either, say, I don't recall what happened with Kislyak, but instead he chose a definitive answer. Not yes. He said no. In fact, we now know that he lied. So he decided to lie. And the only thing that I can draw from that, Joy, the only thing that I know is that someone who spent 33 years in that community had to have been faced with a position that if he told the truth would have been far, far worse than the lie. So the question here, Joy, is why was he lying? What was he protecting? What was he afraid of telling? Why was he afraid of telling the truth?
Yeah, and I think that's a definitive question, because it's not as if, Rosa, it wouldn't have even been something that you could presume if you are Michael Flynn, who, by the way, was the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is not a guy who just walked in off the street. He's a career military man, a three-star general. Why would you not just assume that your conversations with Sergei Kislyak were being recorded, right? It does sort of defy credulity. You sort of wonder, why would somebody in that position, who must know that the other side of that conversation is being recorded, would lie? But what are your thoughts?
You would think so, Joy, although I will tell you the one and only time that I met Mike Flynn while he was head of the DIA, I went with a group of other think tank folks over to visit him at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's a very smart man. He asked all kinds of smart questions. He presented us all with a commemorative coin commemorating our visit, and the date on the coin was the wrong date. So maybe that just says it all. I don't know. It is truly bizarre, right? If you are the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, you know to a complete certainty that we do monitor the electronic communications of foreign diplomats, particularly when they come from states that are considered to be adversarial to the United States. It's bizarre. I mean, I think that if he thought he was doing nothing wrong, if he just had a brain fart, as we call them, as my children call them, then you just say to the FBI, I shouldn't have done that. I screwed up. I really goofed here. I shouldn't have been having those conversations. I think it's absolutely right that lying about them to the FBI suggests that there was more going on that was even worse.
Yeah, I mean, you do what Karl Rove did in the Valerie Plame situation. You go back and revise your statement so that they are no longer lies. You know, Matt, the other extraordinary thing about this, in the Flynn statement that he put out afterwards, that he himself defends himself against the T word, treason. He says, after over 33 years in military service to our country, including nearly 5 years in combat away from my family, and then my decision to continue to serve the United States, it's been extraordinarily painful to endure these many months of false accusations of, and he puts in quotes, treason and other outrageous acts. That, to me, was extraordinary. For him to himself invoke the idea of treason, it begs actually more questions.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, obviously he's pushing back somewhat against the idea that he colluded with a foreign government, that he had any inappropriate contacts with Russians. And I think, you know, the story that he is trying to tell, and you see it somewhat in this statement of offense that Mueller released yesterday, is that everything he did, he was directed to do. When we get to the question of why he lied about these contacts, what we found out yesterday is he wasn't just lying to cover up for himself. He wasn't just lying to cover up the fact that he had had these conversations with Sergei Kislyak. He was lying to cover up the fact that a vast number of people inside the transition, later inside the White House, knew that he was doing it. We found out that he had called down to Mar-a-Lago, talked to his deputy, K.T. McFarland, who was meeting with other transition officials, including presumably the president, Reince Priebus. We found out that he talked to Jared Kushner in one other instance. So he wasn't just lying to save himself. He was protecting an entire apparatus inside the White House that was in on this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's do a little round robin on some of those people who might have some exposure here, Paul. But let's start with Jared Kushner. We know that Michael Flynn talked to senior transition officials, quote unquote, about his contacts with Russia. One of them presumably could be Jared Kushner. This is from the Wall Street Journal back in November. Jared Kushner also happens to be the person who reportedly pushed for the firing of Jim Comey, who was investigating all this. How much exposure does Jared Kushner have?
You know, so the statement of offense contains this
He called the director of the NSA, asked all of those people to interfere and try to stop the Russian investigation. It's very hard to believe he called all these officials he barely knew, and he didn't call his close relationship with, and didn't ask him to inappropriately intervene as well. And I think that's the kind of scene, those are the kind of things you're going to see Bob Mueller looking for to prove obstruction of justice.
And Rosa Brooks, should we now start to look with a little bit more prejudice or a little bit more skepticism at this White House narrative that Mike Pence was simply lied to and knew nothing? I mean, Mike Pence was intimately involved as well. I mean, I think he was a part of the transition team. You know, when Sally Yates gave this warning that Michael Flynn might have a problem, one would presume the Vice President of the United States was told that too. So is Mike Pence out of the woods here?
I don't think anybody's out of the woods. I think clearly we're likely to see more revelations coming in the weeks ahead of us, the weeks and months ahead of us, as Flynn tells Mueller whatever he knows, and I don't think anybody is safe. The one other thing I just wanted to say about Flynn, you know, it's hard to underestimate how betrayed many of the military personnel I speak to feel by Flynn's behavior. We have hundreds of thousands of enlisted men and women who are told constantly and reminded constantly, you will be fired, you will be prosecuted, you know, if you don't stick straight to the line in terms of avoiding contact with foreign adversaries, in terms of telling the truth and so forth. And then when they see a three-star general like Mike Flynn doing this, I think it's really, you know, it's a slap in the face for all of those people who have been abiding by the rules all along.
Yeah, and Naveed, you know, not only, you know, skirting the rules in terms of his lobbying, but dealing with, you know, autocratic governments and taking cash, you know, taking money from...
Cashing out, absolutely.
Absolutely, cashing out. So, Naveed, you have him not just taking money from RT to go and sit with Vladimir Putin at his table, he and Jill Stein both being at that table, but also taking money allegedly from, interest in Turkey, this renditioning conspiracy theory of trying to take a U.S. resident and ship them off to Turkey, and involving his son. The New York Times on Friday.
It's the absolute antithesis of the idea of service.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Michael Flynn's son, Mike Jr., who was intimately involved in these lobbying efforts, has not been charged with a crime. It's not clear whether his possible legal exposure was extra pressure that pushed Flynn to plead guilty. The Washington Post is reporting that Flynn Jr. is not expected to be charged. I want to ask first Naveed, but then also Paul, what that says to you. Why Mike Flynn Jr. would not be on the hook?
I think that, you know, look, this is a pretty sweetheart deal that Mike Flynn has, and I'm sure, you know, Matt Miller can speak to this, but when it comes to these cases, you know, the government has time on their side. Michael Flynn does not. I mean, we've heard he's going to put his house up for sale. I mean, these defenses are not just incredibly difficult to mount, they're expensive, and I think that that's probably a couple of things that were on the dock besides the fact that he doesn't want to necessarily go to jail. I'm sure his pension, his military pension, Michael Flynn's pension, as well as his son. I think that these are, you know, the litany of charges, the litany of conspiracies that are alleged here. I think the fact that this has been boiled down to one simple charge speaks volumes to what Flynn has offered. And look, we know what the risk is: exposure, not just him, his son, his livelihood, his family. I mean, I think that there's a lot he had on the table to negotiate with.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, that was what a lot of people said. They only charged him with one thing, just like the FBI. They could have gotten him for any number of things related to the use of money, the misuse of money, hiding tax. I mean, there were lots of other things they could have charged. So the fact that they didn't charge him with anything more than lying to the FBI, and they didn't charge his son, what does that say to you?
Mueller already knows. Again, there's his proffer, so he knows exactly what it is that Flynn has to offer, and whatever it was good enough for him to give Flynn this sweetheart deal. And as for the son, again, when prosecutors want to get you, they don't just go for you, they go for your people, they go for your family, and that's what makes people change positions. And again, that's why now with Trump, this is getting personal. This is Flynn, but it's also his son and his son-in-law. And so we can expect that the president might react differently here than he has to other phases of this investigation.
And Rosa, we know that, you know, Donald Trump seemed to have a particular interest in protecting Mike Flynn. It was Flynn that he asked Comey to protect, and then before he fired Jim Comey. You know, Flynn does seem to be the person with the most jeopardy. But I wanted to come back to something that you said, Rosa, about the military community. Could Flynn lose his pension over this?
He could, absolutely.
I'm sorry, what, say again? He could.
Yeah, no, he absolutely could.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question about that. I want to go around and just ask what you all think could happen in theory if Donald Trump were to try to pardon Mike Flynn, Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, or anyone else so far that's been involved in this. Matt, you first.
It's really too late to pardon Mike Flynn, because what happens if he pardons him, suddenly Flynn loses the ability to take the Fifth Amendment, because he has nothing, you know, he can't incriminate himself if he's already been pardoned. So Mueller already knows everything he would testify to, and he would be able to compel his testimony. So it would get Flynn out of this guilty plea, but it wouldn't prevent him from testifying against the president, even if he wanted to. So it's a little bit too late. But with respect to the Manafort Gates, he could certainly do it there. You would hope that that would be the red line that would lead Congress to act. I'm skeptical that a Republican House would do it, but it would certainly tee that issue up of the president being an absolute lawless president foursquare in front of the Congress.
Same question, Paul Butler.
If he does it, he's writing his own article of impeachment. President Trump is. Again, the question is, will the Republican Congress have the will? At the end of the day, it's not going to work, because Mike Flynn, for example, he'd just be charged with kidnapping or conspiracy to kidnap as a state crime in New York. President Trump has no power to pardon anybody for a state crime. So either way, there's leverage over Mike Flynn. Whatever Mike Flynn knows about President Trump will come out.
Wow. All right. Well, Paul Butler, Naveed Jamali, Rosa Brooks, and Matt Miller. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Stay right there. Up next, your moment of Maxine.
I'm sorry. The level of corruption, the criminal behavior, all these things that are going on. I mean, it's just unbelievable what we're seeing in our country today.
There's an old playground saying, he who smelt it, dealt it. And that certainly seems to be the case for disgraced former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who on Friday pleaded guilty in federal court to lying to the FBI. Now, this is, of course, the same Michael Flynn who famously led Lock Her Up chants aimed at Hillary Clinton during the 2016 Republican National Convention, offering delicious irony for Democrats like Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who tweeted after the plea, "Lock him up, lock him up." Joining me now for your moment of Maxine is Congresswoman Maxine Waters herself. And Congresswoman, you know, all schadenfreude aside, I want to play one more bite from Michael Flynn's quite raucous performance at the Republican National Convention when he was far more smug. Here he is.
Yes. Lock her up. If I, a guy who knows this business, if I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today.
So, Congresswoman, I think, can we officially say that he has done at least a tenth of what Hillary Clinton is supposed to have done?
Let me just say that This administration was warned by Obama. Sally Yates warned them that he was probably compromised by the Russians. Trump paid no attention. Pence paid no attention. They know who he is and what he's all about. And so he has been caught. And Mueller has done what I've always known he would do, starting to connect the dots and bring them in. And we know that he would like to have immunity. Remember, he kind of asked for it some time ago. This man is guilty of something, and I think it's a lot. And I think the president is connected and knows what it is.
And, you know, Congresswoman, you have been out there, you know, touting the idea that Donald Trump should face impeachment. That has fallen on deaf ears among your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, among Republicans. Does this indictment and this guilty plea of Michael Flynn, have you seen it change the attitudes on the other side of the aisle at all?
Not yet, but I think it's going to be hard for the Republicans to continue to be silent and to be standing with this president as it unfolds. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's lots more to come, and I think it's going to lead right to not only collusion, obstruction of justice, money laundering. It goes on and on and on. We are at a point in time in the United States of America. I know that I've been calling for impeachment. I know I've been criticized, but I know everything that I have learned about him and his allies, their interest in lifting the sanctions, their connection to Putin, their connection to the Kremlin. I know that we're going to find that this president needs to be impeached.
And, you know, in all seriousness, there have been some real questions about Donald Trump's mental state. Not only Tony Schwartz, who is the person who actually wrote The Art of the Deal, Bob Corker, who has called the White House an adult daycare center. You tweeted on Friday, Mr. President, there's help for your deteriorating mental health. It's called admitting guilt and telling the truth. Why do you suppose that even with Republicans, either on background or on the record, questioning this president's mental stability, they haven't been willing to actually do anything about it?
You know, the Republican Party is in disarray. I don't know that it is a party anymore. First of all, you're absolutely correct. They're silent. They aren't saying anything. Tillerson called him a moron. People are questioning his mental health. And look what they just did with this tax reform bill. They created a $1 trillion deficit when they're supposed to be the conservatives, concerned about our budget, concerned about our expenditures. So I don't know who the Republicans are anymore. They're simply now tax and spend Republicans. They're simply Republicans who are standing behind a president who's taking us to war, who's bullying, who's taunting, who's carrying us right into a war with North Korea. I don't know that there is a Republican Party. It is absolutely outrageous.
Well, let's talk about that tax bill for just a second. Just a few of the highlights, if you want to call them that. For individuals, it doubles the standard deduction. It eliminates personal exemptions. It repeals state and local tax deductions, which is going to really hurt people in states like New York. It expands the child tax credits for corporations. It cuts the rate to 20%. It lowers taxes for pass-through businesses like real estate development firms like Donald Trump's. As you said, it's going to add about $1.4 trillion to the deficit, but it's also going to raise taxes on the poorest Americans. We've been talking earlier, including with Charlie Sykes and other Republicans or former Republicans, who say once this thing passes, which is the thing that Paul Ryan and Republicans have wanted most, really, to slash taxes on the wealthy, raise them on the poor, and then cut into entitlements. Once they do that, and they don't need Donald Trump anymore, do you think then that is the point at which Republicans drop him?
I don't know, and some people are saying that they just wanted to get past this tax scam that they're doing, and then this would free them up in order to do what they should be doing and truly representing the people. But let me just tell you, this tax scam that they're fostering on the American people is simply, you know, a tax scam that's for the wealthy. I mean, they have never touched the 35% to 20% reduction for corporate taxes. that has been consistent on the House side and on the Senate side. Reduce those taxes for the big corporate interests in America from 35% to 20%. They have fiddled around with a lot of things, but the fact of the matter is they're willing to penalize poor people, hardworking Americans who don't make a lot of money, middle-class Americans. The individual cuts that you will see, little tax cuts, they all are going to be no good in 10 years from now. They're temporary. But the corporate tax deductions are permanent.
Yeah, and how do your colleagues, I'm always fascinated with by the conversations that must be taking place on, across the aisle. How do they justify, for instance, rescinding the tax break for teachers who buy school supplies, or the tax break for grad students who are not rich who want to go to school, or making the tax exemption for people who send their kids to private school get more generous the more wealthy you are? I mean, is there a way that they try to explain to you why they have to do that?
No, they don't attempt to justify it. They think they can get away with anything. They think they can tell their constituents anything. You're absolutely right. We have teachers all over America who spend their money to make sure that they have the supplies and equipment that they need for their children in the classroom. And they don't say, thank you, teachers.
Thanks to home for joining us this hour.
We're going to give you a tax break. No, they are making their lives more difficult by not allowing them to deduct even the interest or any of the money that they're spending. And with the students who they claim to care about, no, they're going to charge them higher interest on the student loans. They are outrageous, and they think that those constituents who are voting for them don't know, they won't find out, and they don't have to answer to them. It's outrageous.
Yeah. And we haven't even gotten into it, but gerrymandering and voter suppression kind of gives them an insurance policy. So maybe if people want to vote against them, they may not be able to get rid of them. That's all.
Maybe not. Maybe not. But they got Jeff Sessions there doing their bidding.
Yeah, indeed. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. I've got to go do the parade. We're doing Christmas parade today.
Oh, wonderful. We'll have a great time. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Take care. And coming up, the battle for Alabama. Donald Trump is heading to Roy Moore country. Stay with us.
When I say they, who are they? They're liberals. They don't want conservative values. They're the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender who want to change our culture. They're socialists who want to change our way of life, putting man above God.
Wow, Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore is blaming a vast conspiracy for the multiple allegations he faces of sexual misconduct. Moore has denied he targeted teenage girls for sexual liaisons, including a 14-year-old, and trolled for teenage girls at their schools and at the local mall when he was a prosecutor in his 30s. And he will soon get some fresh backup from his most powerful defender. As the Washington Post first reported, Donald Trump will hold a campaign-style rally in Pensacola, Florida, just 20 miles from the Alabama border, 4 days before the December 12 election. And joining me now, Jimmy Williams, host of the Decode DC podcast, and Amy Kramer of Women for Roy Moore. I want to play an ad that the Roy Moore campaign is currently running in that Alabama Senate race. Take a look.
A vote for Roy Moore means securing the border, defending the Second Amendment, tax cuts, and conservative Supreme Court judges. And Doug Jones? Well, we'll let President Trump tell you about Doug Jones.
We don't need a liberal person in there. Jones, I've looked at his record. It's terrible on crime, bad on borders, bad with the military, bad for the Second Amendment.
And Jimmy, before I come to you on this, Donald Trump has added to that by also just openly defending Roy Moore. Let's listen to that.
He totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen. So, you know, let me just tell you, Roy Moore denies it. That's all I can say. He denies it. And by the way, he totally denies it.
Does Roy Moore, does Donald Trump's backing, Jimmy, wind up carrying Roy Moore over the top in all likelihood? Or does it matter?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know that it matters. I mean, I think we'll, see. I think he's going to Pensacola, which is about 20 miles from the Alabama border, 4 days before this special election. And there'll be some polling that will be done between that rally and, of course, Election Day. And we'll know whether or not Donald Trump is giving him a bump. But I'm not so sure that he will. What I do know is this. When those two men are standing on that stage together, 18 women collectively have accused both of those men of being sexual predators. And that's a rather stark sort of thing to think about and ponder. I can tell you this as well. Roy Moore, in that campaign ad that talked about, you showed just a minute ago, he said, the gay and lesbians are blah, 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 they're changing our country. Here's a dirty little secret, everybody. We've been around a really long time, like since the beginning of time. And no, we're not going back in the closet for you folks, and we're never going to have to listen to this kind of stuff again. I don't know whether or not Roy Moore is going to win or not. I think he will. He's bumped up in the polls, although there's a Washington Post poll that came out this morning that has Jones within the margin of error, a 3-point lead. So we'll see what happens there. But look, it's Alabama, and guess what? They like having conservatives in the Senate, so let's let them send one. Fine with me. That's Mitch McConnell's problem, not mine.
Yeah, and Amy, I want to read you just a little bit of the letter that Lee Korfman, who is one of the multiple accusers of Roy Moore, I believe she was the 14-year-old that when he allegedly accosted her, and she says this, and this was published in an Alabama newspaper. I'm not getting paid for speaking up. I'm not getting rewarded from your political opponents. What I'm getting is stronger by refusing to blame myself and speaking the truth out loud. What you did to me when I was 14 years old should be revolting to every person of good morals. But now you are attacking my honesty and integrity. Where does your immorality end? Amy, do you believe Lee Korfman?
Joy, it doesn't, I wasn't there. I don't know any of the facts. I was not there. You weren't there. I'm not here to judge these women or to call these women out. I am with Women for Trump, and we endorsed Roy Moore. I was at an event, Women for Roy Moore, 2 weeks ago. But this is the thing, is that Alabama's going to make the decision. And you asked the question, does it matter that President Trump's going there? I'm glad to see he's going there. But at the end of the day, I think Alabamians are going to decide. And what's, I think, really relevant here is that the people across this country are tired of Washington sticking their nose into everybody's business and trying to choose the candidates and the races. And I think this is a rebellion against Mitch McConnell and the $20 to $30 million that he spent. And so whether or not President Trump goes or not, I think that the people are still going to come forward, and I think they will vote for Roy Moore.
Let me just to go back to my original question. Do you believe the women who accused Bill Clinton back in the 90s?
I mean, there's a lot of accusations out there. I'm not here to judge any of these women. I don't think that's right. I wasn't there.
But why
I'm not here to judge any of these women.
Why would a woman come forward and say that Roy Moore did this to her when she was a 14-year-old girl? You don't believe them? You don't have an opinion on whether what they're saying is true? And if it's true, let me ask you this question, Amy. If it's true that he preyed on teenage girls when he was a 30-something-year-old prosecutor, does that immorality matter to you as a voter?
Joy, this is the thing, is that I myself and my family are victims of being accused of the most horrific, horrible things you can imagine for political reasons. There's still litigation going on in the state of Georgia.
You're not answering my question.
No, I am. I believe in you're innocent until proven guilty. That is what this country is founded upon, and I believe that. I was not there. I'm not going to judge these people. I mean, that is not why I'm here. There's an Alabama Senate race, and regardless of what I say, you say, or what Jimmy says, or anybody says in the media, the talking heads, the Alabamian voters they're going to decide. And for us to pretend that they don't have the knowledge and the wherewithal to lay all this out in front of them and make the decision for themselves, that's just preposterous. These are smart, educated people, and I believe that they're going to decide what is best for them.
Jimmy, it sounds to me like Amy is essentially saying that this doesn't matter to her. I mean, it sounds like there are a certain percentage of Alabama voters for whom the allegations of child molestation are irrelevant. There's a poll that comes out where it asks the question, who has higher standards of personal moral conduct? Doug Jones wins that easily 53% to 34%. So if Doug Jones is thought to have higher moral standards by a margin of 53 to 34, and yet he's only leading in the poll by a 3-point margin, is that an indication that there are some voters in Alabama who just decided that they don't care about his morality?
That is exactly right. I find this a fascinating conversation for this one point. If, in fact, Roy Moore wins, and I think he will, and it comes out, and Amy's asking for proof, you know, innocent until proven guilty, and if there's, in fact, proof that Roy Moore did any of the things that he's accused of doing, will you stand by him, and will you still be, you know, women for Roy Moore? I mean, I just, would you support an ethics investigation? You know, we can have a conversation all day about Washington, D.C. and Mitch McConnell. Nobody in Alabama gives a damn about Mitch McConnell. I hate to break the news to everyone. But
I hate to break it to you, Jimmy.
They
absolutely do.
Well, let me hold on a second.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. Let me finish.
Quickly, Jimmy, and then I want to have Amy answer questions.
Nobody cares about Mitch McConnell except in Kentucky. And just like you said, Alabamians vote for people running in Alabama. Kentuckians vote for people running in Kentucky. And that's a fact. And I don't care about Mitch McConnell in South Carolina or Virginia or anywhere else I live.
You may not, but
I do care.
Let me hold on.
If you elect a sexual predator to the Senate.
Right.
That's what I have a problem with.
Time out. Let me ask Amy 2 quick questions. One question.
Yeah.
If Roy Moore gets elected, and then proof emerges, proof positive, that he actually did molest the girls, would you change your support for him then?
Joy, we have stood beside him, and if he is elected, that is what the voters will choose.
So even if he was adjudicated to be a child molester?
Point here. This is the thing. If he is elected, there should not be any ethics investigations, and the reason is because these people are going to the polls knowing all the information that's been put in front of them. They have the wherewithal to make the decision. Okay. And should there become an ethics investigation and Mitch McConnell and his cronies try to expel him from the United States Senate, that's a very dangerous line that they're crossing, because
we're talking about if he's found guilty of child molestation. Okay, let's talk about another thing that we know that Roy Moore did. Okay, well, you know, if you can even say the words, putting aside child molestation, alleged child molestation, Roy Moore led the charge against removing segregation from the Alabama Constitution. That he definitely did. Does the fact that he did that impact your support for him, Amy?
Joy, I'm going to say this. First of all, we got involved in this race, months ago. We actually endorsed Mo Brooks. And then we came to the runoff, and now here we are. We are standing beside Roy Moore.
But can you just answer my question, Amy? Don't give me a speech, Amy. Answer my question.
I don't agree. There is not one candidate across this country, including President Trump, that I agree with on every single issue.
Do you have a problem with Roy Moore leading the charge against removing segregation from the state constitution? It's really a yes or no.
Joy, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll put it back up on the screen. Let me put it back up so you know what I'm talking about. Roy Moore led the charge against removing segregation language. You know that Alabama has a history here. He led the charge against removing the language of segregation from the Constitution. It's pretty straightforward. Do you have a problem with that?
Can you tell me more about that? Because I don't know what you're talking about. Do I believe in segregation? Absolutely not. We're all the same. We're all Americans.
Okay, but you don't have a problem with it. So, Jimmy, I'm going to give you the last word here because it does seem to me that there is nothing that one could say about Roy Moore that would move Amy Kramer and other supporters of Roy Moore off him. Really, actually, nothing. You haven't said there is anything.
I just wonder. I just wonder something. If Roy Moore actually, you know, Donald Trump said I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I'd still get elected. He did. And guess what? He was right. If Roy Moore did exactly the same thing, they're going to stand by him because he's a Republican. It doesn't matter. Listen, and I'm fine with Republicans owning Republicans. I'm totally okay with that. I just think that you have to, when you own them, you have to own everything about them. Literally everything. And if that means he's a segregationist or a homophobe or a misogynist, then you have to own that. That's your party. Your party is standing by someone that supports those things.
Okay.
Are you going to say the same thing about Democrats? Because that's one of the big problems in Washington, D.C., is that it's all about party politics. I don't care about Washington, D.C. I care about a sexual...
All right, I'm calling a timeout. The segment is over, but it does sound to me, Amy, like you're saying that that you do believe that whatever allegations are against Democrats, because you just said that you can't judge when it's Republicans, but against Democrats you believe in whatever it is, and you think Democrats should be accountable for it. It's pretty extraordinary.
We as Americans, it is better for us to look at issues instead of being so loyal to party. Child molestation is an issue. I hate to say it, but you know, the protection of our children. I have kids. The child molestation, and I do
it's
too.
kind of an issue.
I absolutely do. I have a daughter.
You have to. Wow. Well, you have to own the fact that that it doesn't bother you that this man might have molested children.
Can I just say? Can I just say one thing really quickly?
Very fast, very fast.
Can I just say one thing really quickly?
Yeah.
As a victim of child molestation, I think it's disgusting that Amy would actually support a child molester.
Well, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. And I never like to do that, but we have to, because in my ear they're saying that the segment is over. Jimmy Williams,
accusations. He has been accused, not proven guilty.
That is true. Thank you very much. He has been accused of child molestation. Up next, international outrage. We're going to take it across the pond. How Donald Trump ticked off America's closest ally.
And one of the advantages of having such a special relationship with the United States is when a friend tells you you've done something dreadfully wrong, you tend to listen. And wouldn't the world be a better place if the Prime Minister could persuade the President of the United States to delete his Twitter account?
The United States' closest ally is throwing stones from across the pond after Donald Trump put a crack in the special relationship with his reckless tweets. Trump earned himself a rebuke from British Prime Minister Theresa May after he retweeted misleading anti-Muslim videos from a far-right fringe group in Britain. Now, this may not be the last we hear of Trump's snubs by the Brits, as it's still an open question whether he'll be on the guest list at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's spring wedding. Joining me now from London is producer and columnist Martin Lewis. So, Martin, let's start with the tongue lashing that Donald Trump got at the hands of members of Parliament this past week over that the retweet of that Muslim video. Does that signal that the Brits may want to walk back even the idea of Trump visiting? I think he has an imminent visit coming up.
Well, there's been a disgust with Donald Trump since the day he was elected. The British people are fairly divided politically, but they are united about Donald Trump. There's been a desire to not have him make the state visit. But after he retweeted these videos from an extremist far-right organization, which was the equivalent, our parents' generation, the greatest generation, fought together, the Brits and the Americans, against Nazi scum. This organization is Nazi scum, kind of like the KKK. And the woman who actually put out these videos is like the Sebastian Gorka of Britain without the humility. Yeah. So there's revulsion in Britain from all sides of the political spectrum that Donald Trump could have done this or associate with these people.
Yeah, and you had the spokesperson for Donald Trump say that it doesn't matter if the videos in question, which essentially tried to accuse Muslims of homicide and attacks on non-Muslims, that it doesn't matter if they were real or not because the idea is real. What is the thought on that over there in the UK?
Exactly. I mean, the thought is just simply, this is clearly dog whistle stuff. We do have fringe elements in all societies. We've had it in Britain as well, but it's always a small minority, but they're given standing by social media. And the thought that an American president could share this with his 44 million followers, enablers, whatever you want to call them, is really repugnant. And there's actually been an uptick in support or joining of the Facebook page of this right-wing organization since Trump tweeted these videos. So there's absolute disgust and a hoping that this will end soon.
Let's talk about the impending wedding of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, which has all of us over here in the former colonies all excited. I guess it's sort of ironic that we fought a whole war to get ourselves out from under the Queen, but we're still interested in the royals on this side of the pond. What do you make of the reaction? Have people in Britain reacted as strongly to the idea of this interracial relationship as we have over in the U.S.?
With the exception of the usual suspects of right-wing loonies, there's been great support for it, and it's lovely. I mean, listen, Britain and America have had a couple of disagreements along the way, 1776, 1812, but they are, with the exception of the disgust for Donald Trump, which does unite them, the British and the Americans are coming closer together. They like each other. So there is great happiness that this very beautiful woman who has proudly got her African African-American heritage, and they could be coming together. I don't think there's any likelihood that Donald Trump will be invited to the wedding, though, because there is a royal proclamation in 1378 that if there is a wedding in a royal chapel, there can only be 2 people with orange hair there. Now, Prince Harry has orange hair, and the one who didn't get the marmalade colour from a bottle has priority. So I don't think Trump's going to be invited.
And I think presumably the Obamas would, however. I mean, there's quite a close relationship between the royal family, at least the younger set, and the Obamas. So you would assume they would be there?
There is a warmth, and one hopes that that might happen. It's going to be a private wedding. It's not going to be a big Westminster Abbey type thing. But by the way, I am being a little cruel about Donald Trump. I think we should cut him a little bit of slack. There has been some discussion here that Donald Trump had been constantly saying that he hoped to be revered as a leader like Lincoln. And I can say now that it is going to be the case. He is like Lincoln. Lincoln Rockwell, the founder and leader of the American Nazi Party, mercifully no longer with us. The other thing that has been commented on in Britain here about Donald Trump is that he's not been given sufficient credit for a couple of things. One is he said there was going to be a big tax cut for Christmas, and it's actually in the Bible. It says, "Lo, there shall come a great profit unto the land." And if you're a billionaire or a corporation, they will be getting a profit. And his family values are fantastic because his children are going to get $1 billion.
Windfall.
And he's sympathetic to child molesters. He's very compassionate.
Martin, I hate to stop you. Really, I do, but we have to go. Thank you so much, Martin Lewis in London. Appreciate it. Thank you. Tune in for more AM Joy tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. In the meantime, keep it right here on MSNBC.